So with that, let me go ahead and introduce Jason Klinghoffer. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay, Brad?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Great. Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for inviting me. This is probably the second or third opportunity I've had to join you guys on a conference and give you guys a little bit of an insight into the use case scenario for Mischler Financial Group. And so I will, for purposes of just giving you guys some information about who we are and what we do, we'll spend the first few minutes going over that stuff, and then instead of going into what I know that over 2 days of this conference, you guys have been inundated with matrices and formulas and scripting and all this fun stuff that Quantrix does. Hopefully, you guys have a really good basis and knowledge of what it's capable of from the internal side of things. I actually want to switch gears and show you what we actually do from a client interface side of things. So we use Quantrix in a specifically client-only mode, meaning that we use cloud 100% for all the delivery of our analytics. There are no other modelers in the system. All models are designed and developed in-house and deployed in the cloud. And so we'll get to that a little bit more, but I thought it might be a bit of a unique approach in being able to see more of the presentation side of what Quantrix is capable of doing and how we've utilized that to build our business. So let me share my screen here with you real quick. Let's make sure that this is all working right. There we go. Excellent. So hopefully you guys can see that slide here. So to start out, who are we? So Mischler Financial Group is actually the nation's oldest service-disabled veteran investment bank and broker-dealer in the country. We were the first FINRA member to become federally certified as a service-disabled veteran business enterprise. So we are considered a minority class dealer in the realms of trading in Wall Street terms. We were founded in 1994. And we basically deliver both domestic and international trading to institutional clients. So we have no retail clients. We're not like the TD Ameritrades of the world. We only deal with institutions that have some level of sophistication associated with them. So we specialize in fixed income trading, which is really where the company was founded. And then we also do equity trading, and then corporate and corporate debt and equity underwriting, meaning that we partake in underwrite and participate in IPOs and in underwriting new debt structures for various corporations throughout the country. So we're a small firm, but we have a very big impact in the market because we've been around so long. We get in on a lot of deals, and we do a lot of trading with some pretty sophisticated and well-known clients. And Quantrix, for my team, has become very integral into how we're building that business and really moving it into kind of the next century of operations as to how we're going to look at building our business going forward. So again, my team, I specialize in fixed income trading. So my side of the coin is only in the fixed income side, so bonds, agency bonds, treasury bonds, corporate bonds, things like that. And I deal specifically with government institutions, meaning that I deal only with cities, counties, state governments, special districts. I even have a federal client through the Department of Interior. And so there are various institutional clients that we work with throughout the country that are all government-based, and we help them essentially invest money from reserves. So those reserves either exist because of bond issuances or money raised from bond underwritings, or from treasury pools that have existed over the years and have built up a considerable amount of reserves. So most cities and counties that you guys live in, your constituents, will have some sort of treasury portfolio that exists, and some level investing is going on behind the scenes to try and keep those dollars invested while why that money's not being used, right, and being put into public service. So my job is to help facilitate the transactions and to ultimately try and get the right bonds into the hands of these government institutions. And we want to do that utilizing some sophistication and the technology, and that's really where Quantrix has come in. So I'll talk to you a little bit about this new opportunity, and it's kind of cool. This is the first time that I'm actually going to get to showcase a little bit of this platform publicly. It's something that we're going to be launching in the beginning of next year. But up until really early in 2020, our entire business model had been on the post-transaction side of the equation, meaning that once an entity had bought a bond or had a portfolio of bonds, we created analytics in the cloud utilizing Quantrix that would give them almost like a balance sheet view of what was going on in the portfolio. We could provide benchmarking and cash flow modeling and all this stuff to tell them then what forward-looking observations are we seeing that will give them the next opportunity to invest that aligns them with their benchmark and their strategy, right? And we delivered that value basically for free. We pay for the cloud and the accounts. We do run an enterprise server in-house, currently, and we basically deliver those models, the various solutions that we've created in the cloud to the individual clients, and in return, we provide some competitive execution, right? So they'll come back to us, and obviously we have to be in the realm of from a price perspective that other firms would be at, but it's kind of the type goes to the runner type of equation we look at and say, look, if we delivered the value to you, and you can do this business with anybody, hopefully this value will get you to come and just do the business with us. Because there are a lot of firms in this business that can facilitate transactions in the institutional public fund space. Many dozens of firms that could do that. However, we are the only firm in the country that is doing anything like what you're about to see today. So we use the Quantrix Enterprise platform to help our clients understand where they are, what their next investments could be. In early 2020, we had a major company that was actually involved in the accounting and trade processing side of public accounting decided basically that they were going to get out of the business. They've been around for decades. There was a lot of public institutions that had their system. And it turns out that they just decided that they didn't want to do this anymore. They were going to wrap it into a new product that was more oriented towards private business or public companies and GAAP-oriented accounting type of environment, and became very expensive for them to continue to do this. And so they basically said they were going to quit, and it really left a hole in the market for a lot of these institutions on the pre-transaction side of the coin, meaning, once they've come up to the decision and they actually need to execute a bond and they actually need to go through that process, they need a methodology to be able to capture what's going on in their cash accounts, to essentially, model the bonds and execute the bonds, create the trade tickets, ultimately create the journal entries and ultimately connect to the general ledger of the institution, and then whatever analytics it could provide after that was obviously a benefit, but mainly the accounting and reporting component, then being able to just facilitate the basics of the transaction now had become in question because the alternatives in the market besides this product are very old. There's one other company out there that's really trying to be in this market. They're a big company, a public company now, and they are really expensive. And so what we've really decided is that, because of these alternatives and because of the requests from our clients, back in that time frame in 2020, decided to take a crack at it. And for the past year, we've basically been developing this new system. And I call it a new system because it's a new suite of models that I affectionately call PAIR, which is the Portfolio Entry, Accounting, and Reporting Modeling System. All right, and so it's about 90% completed right now. We're anticipating hopefully a first quarter launch in 2022. I said 2021 there. Sorry, 2022. And we're going to be beta testing here for the next few months, and working also with the Quantrix guys and some of the scripting and things like that for the interface side of things. But it's definitely an exciting time for us to be able to really start to look at this opportunity and move into a new element of business. And so, again, the market right now, the alternatives are weak, they're expensive, or they sit in non-cloud technology. So the old school technology of downloading on CD your accounting software and putting it on the system. You got a single user license. There's no way to collaborate amongst groups, so on and so forth. So this really gives us an opportunity to utilize a system that we're already utilizing for other things to be able to come in and start to compete in this business. And so it really should open up a new revenue stream for us, because up until now we have been dealing primarily through value-added brokerage. So we're delivering these analytics for free in return for competitive brokers. So we'll come in and hopefully we get to compete for their business, but there's no quid pro quo. There's no guarantee that we're going to get the business. But we do the best we can utilizing it, and so far it's done well for us. But this new platform really moves us into the business of a fee-based accounting platform, SaaS software provider that we can actually start charging monthly for, because there's a separation between the brokerage activity that an institution is doing and the accounting and finance side of things that they're doing internally, and they're going to pay for separate systems. So almost every institution has some sort of system in play that they're currently paying for amongst those alternatives that's completely separate from any value-added analytics or any other systems being delivered to them purely for brokerage and execution. It's all those accounting systems internally, there's some sort of fee associated with that. And so we're essentially moving into that space. We want to be that provider, because ultimately if we can do that well and connect it to the post-transaction analysis that we already have, we now have a full suite of software across the board that's very, very difficult to compete with, because it will help the portfolio manager essentially do everything from A to Z. And there's no other platform right now that really could do that. So fingers crossed, but we really feel we have a great shot at making a big noise over the next few years with this type of system. So to give you a quick flow chart of how the system works and what's going on. So you see MaxQ Analytics, that's the name of our system, powered by Quantrix, but our platform in itself is through MaxQ Analytics. The Pair suite of models is this specific set of models. We have other models that do other things, both for internal purposes and for external delivery to clients. But these specific 5 set models are meant specifically to deal with the pair system that I had just talked about. So just to give you a quick idea, so on the left side of the equation here, we have the client Quantrix Access. So that is our interface to the enterprise cloud that we're running, and this is now being moved over to Azure. So we're currently on an internal system that we're running here, but we've moved it over, and now our testing environment for Pair is on a new platform through Microsoft Azure. Their cloud system is hosting it, and then our SQL server as well is located there. So it actually creates a very fast environment for our clients, because both the model server and the SQL server reside in the same arena. So we should be able to see some significant performance improvements in the way that the data flow occurs between the models and our SQL server. So again, prior to Pair, the majority of the data linking or data imports that we would do were CSV based. So we would have hard files located and stored on network servers that would pull in the data that we needed and then deploy the analytics. With this system, given some of the complexities involved and given the need for individual clients to have their own databases of information across the board, from cash, their journal entries, their trade activity, their trade tickets. There's a lot of different elements that need to be accounted for. And so we knew that some sort of SQL or H2 type of environment for us was where we needed to move. And so ultimately we did actually try H2. I know it comes in Quantrix by default as a data import from an H2 database. For those of you out there who ever want to do a web-based cloud infrastructure like we're showing, H2 is very good for testing, but we found out that from a cloud environment, SQL is far superior, and so far has done a great job in being able to implement everything we've been looking for, and it's a very easy implementation in Quantrix. So they've made it actually very easy to add additional drivers and whatnot. So it's and I think there were some other presentations here prior to me that are also using SQL. So, and they can probably attest to that particular setup being fairly straightforward. So again, the client access starts here with this CAT model, which is really our cash entry model, our cash and trading model. And so it basically what happens is the client's going to come in and they're going to submit that information to the database. And as that database receives the information, it also flows through to our operations group. So one of the key elements of this system that makes it so attractive is that it's actually our operations group behind the scenes that is ultimately confirming and driving the ship from building the models or building the securities, ensuring that the cash flow profiles of securities, the calculation types, the basis, the call schedules, the maturity schedules, all of those things are built correctly. One of the biggest downfalls of the current alternatives are that there's no centralized process. Everything is really on the client to be able to come in and enter that information manually one by one. So if you come in and you process and buy a bond from a broker, you're going to receive the information from that bond, but then you're going to spend the next 20 or 30 minutes building that bond in the database. So you have to know, the ticker, the description, the calculation type, the coupons. Is it floating? Is it fixed? Is it step? Is it, all of these elements? And there is a lot. It falls on the user, and the problem is the user isn't necessarily the expert. Right? They're focused on trading and executing their portfolio, not on the calculation integrity of their accounting system. And so what we found in just monitoring some of the old systems and seeing the output, that there was a lot of errors that were happening simply from fat fingers and from people who didn't understand what actually needed to go in what fields. So we had wrong amortization roles, accretion and amortization were off. We had wrong interest accruals and things like that. And so I can only imagine how much that has proliferated in the market and made it, difficult for reconciliation and given accounting departments a lot of headaches. And so the key element that made people really attracted to this idea is that we insert ourselves in the middle of the operation to ensure everything gets built correctly, because we do this every day, 8-9 hours a day. Our operations group is in here, trading, processing, and confirming transactions amongst all these different types of securities. And so putting this into the workflow is really not a huge element for us. If we create the tech, which we have, to make this efficient, then we can do this, confirm trades, build securities, all within a minute or two, and we can even do it at day end and run it all and be able to put everything in, and it will just take really probably a few minutes. So it's a very attractive thing for us, and it's also very attractive for the client to understand that they no longer have to worry about the minutia of building securities and understanding the modeling side of things. So we come in, we confirm that trade, we build that trade, and we build all that information and pop it into what we call a bond data warehouse, which is basically in a warehouse all of those statistics and elements of every single security. And then also there's a confirmation that is kicked back once we process through our model that actually kicks back to the SQL Server to the CAT model, and there's a confirm that you'll see. So you'll actually see that. I'll run you through that model quickly so you can kind of see it. But that confirm will come through, so they know without talking to us or emailing us that we've seen the trade, we've looked at the details, we've confirmed it, and we've built out that security. And so they have peace of mind that this is already done and it's done correctly because we confirmed it. Right. The second part of this is what we call the JETI model, which is our journal entry transaction interest model. And so this is where all of the accounting elements are going to come in the daily reconciliation. So they're going to be able to come in and basically enter in, all of their, buys and sells that have happened will show up. All of the all of the interest payments that have occurred will show up, and the system is calculating those expectations, the date they should be paid, and really the user's only responsibility is to confirm those transactions. And again, I'll get to show you some of that here shortly. So from the Jetty model, all of those journal entries and the daily reconciliation are then updated or uploaded to a third database in our SQL platform called the client MaxQ database, and this warehouses all of the individual client tables that will potentially be on the system. And so there's a specific set of models or specific set of tables that exist in that SQL server in that database, so that they can record the journal entries and the daily reconciliations. So all of that information is recorded, and then it's picked up in our third model called the PAD model, which is really our portfolio analytics dashboard. And so this is where the rubber meets the road for the user to actually be able to start to create very usable analytics for them to make their next decision. So we actually embed that post-transaction analysis, that forward-looking observation element in a new system called the PAD model, which brings that post-transaction together with the pre-transaction of the CAP model and the Jetty model. So the PAD model is really about looking at the current state of the portfolio, the cash flows, the immunizations, the benchmark, making decisions from there. In the fourth model, the pair model, which also feeds off of the same databases, is a monthly reporting model. So this is the model that they will ultimately process, that then becomes the transparent or public version of a report that they are required by GASB, which is the Government Accounting Standards Board, at a minimum every quarter to make public. So every public institution has to publicly, and they should have it on their website. If not, I mean, there's the information requests, the freedom of information requests, like you can go into any city or county and request whatever that report is. But these days, most institutions will have that available on their treasurer's website. So you can go in there and see what the performance was of the portfolio, what their holdings are, so on and so forth. And that's what the pair model is going to do, is give them that reporting element that then they'll be able to come in and Quantrix is finishing up a new feature in the scripting to allow for menu-driven printing. So we'll be able to allow the user to select exactly what reports they want to print out, and then ultimately they can do it in a one-touch scenario. So instead of having to come in and just print each individual canvas, we can go through and select what canvases we know need to be printed, and then it will go through and do everything for you in a one-touch system. And then the fifth one, we won't see this one today. I'm still building on it, but it's the Halo model, and that's really our historical archive, right? It's our historical analytics. And this is going to be where we get to basically look back and see the performance of a portfolio over a long period of time. And we capture several hundred variables that get put in from each month end, and ultimately is captured so that we can pull up this Halo model and then ultimately allow the user to create reports based on all of the history of all the transactions and the yields, the return, the book returns, the portfolio sizes, all that stuff will be available to them to be able to come back and reference through Quantrix. So that's it for this part. I'm going to go ahead and just jump into the cloud server so you guys can see here. Let me do this quick. There we go. Perfect. So hopefully, yeah, you guys should be able to see this here. And so, for any of you who use the cloud, this should be a very familiar screen, right? Once you're past the login screen, you have a model library. And so in this library, again, this is our test bed environment, so there's not very many models here. But you can see here that I basically listed out the first 4 models that we just talked about. And so I'll go through and just show you a little bit of what they do, and talk a little bit about its purpose, and then the presentation aspect of the system. So this first one here, again, the cash and transaction entry model, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is really where the very first elements of a trade happen, right? So where we're going to move cash in and out of the system, we're going to tell them, what investments we're making in cash and what withdrawals we have, what interest is being paid out. Any trade activity that's occurring will also happen here. So We have actually built out a menu-driven system instead of just doing the perspectives, which many of you are or should be familiar with, hopefully, where you can come in here and get to the perspectives, or we actually just have some real simple scripting that then takes them directly to that perspective, so they don't have to remember the drop down. And in doing it this way, we can essentially create the menu that allows them to see what each perspective does. Because if you're only doing this every once in a while, or it's not your daily job, and you come in here just opening up a perspective and seeing these different drop downs may not do you any good if you don't understand what each drop down is going to give you from a canvas perspective, what canvas is going to be available. So here we just have our settings, our cash activity, trade activity, and prepayment activity. So in our settings model, we basically can come in here and we can set up all the information about the account. We can set up who the client is, who the custodian is, what funds they run, what account list they have, their approved broker dealer list. All that information can be put here, and all of that will correspond to when they come in and do cash activity through cash transactions and their rate updates. All that information pulls through. So this is the cash transaction side of things. When a client comes in and wants to update their cash, you can see here 8/31 looks like was the last activity date that's listed. So I'm just going to go in and click update activity. You can see it pops up. Okay, it's activated now. All right, cool. Now we have it through October 8th. So this is going to be all of the deposits, the sweeps, all of that information that they've already prior put into the system. Any new activities, it's a very simple entry to be able to come in and select, the date, to come in and select the transaction type. Was it deposit? Was it withdrawal? Was it interest received? Or was it interest deducted? What the amount was, what the comments were, and just submit it. And when they submit that, it then logs into the system, and they now have that as a cash transaction. We also allow for rate assumptions to be added, so we know what the accrual is during the month for those cash accounts. For any of you that have savings accounts, you know that if you put money away in a savings account or a money market account, there's usually at least a small amount of interest that's associated with that will accrue over time. And so we come in and we can put in those rates so that our system will ultimately calculate the accruals to the best case scenario and be able to get the information correct. So that's the cash side of things. The trade activity side is right here. So there we go. So we got the trade activity side, which is ultimately going to be where we're actually going to process the transactions. All right, we're going to come in and we're going to say, this is what we bought or this is what we sold. And the great part about this is the entire client entry. A basic information about the QSIP, what's their fund, the accounting ID they need to apply. Did they buy it or did they sell it? What was the price? When did it trade? When does it settle? What's the amount, the accrued interest, and then basic details about the bond, just a ticker, coupon, and maturity date. All this information is submitted anytime a broker does a trade with an institution in that space. They'll get a trade confirmation or a trade ticket that has all of that listed on there. So they don't need to be an expert or anything. All that information they can literally just take right off the paper and the page. And in 30 seconds, you can come in and enter all this information. All right, they come in, they submit the trade, and then what happens is you can see down here the status is matched, but when that happens, immediately there will be a trade number that comes up and it will be red and it will say pending. And what that means is that it's hit the database, but our operations group has yet to confirm it. Once our operation group goes through and sees the trade, confirms that it's a real QSIP, confirms the security, confirms the amount and that the accrued interest is correct, they match the trade and they send it back. And with the simple update of the blotter, they'll come in and they can see now it's all these trades are matched. So these are all the trades that have matched over time. For instance, in this sample that you created here that shows you all those trades. The nice thing is by doing that, they now have a functional audit system that they can come in and see all the trades and transactions they've done for any fund over the history of however long they're on the system, whether it's 1 year or the next 10 years, all that information will be available to them and they can come in and filter it out and figure out where that information is, and also creates the trade tickets that ultimately get sent to the custodian. So these trade authorizations get printed out and then ultimately sent out to the custodian so that they know where and what to buy. And at the end of the day, that process at this point for some of the other systems is manual. They have to have either an Excel-based trade ticket, or they have the trade ticket built in there, and they into the accounting system, and then they have to go in, print it out, then send it as a then create a PDF out of that printout, and then send it off. Where the beautiful part is Quantrix, for those who use the cloud, that you can have the print default just be to PDF. So by definition, if we come in and we print something out, it's going to ultimately, sorry guys here, it's ultimately going to create the trade ticket that gives them the full history of all of their tickets over time, right? So this is a very, very nice system for that, just to do those very basic elements. And again, it's recording the data the whole time. And then the third part, which we don't really need to talk about, is like the sync and call side of things. If there's a partial call or a prepayment from a mortgage bond, a mortgage-backed security, they can come in here and ultimately input that information, submit it, and again, our operation sees it, and it's confirmed and done. So this is really kind of the transaction entry side of things, and the day-to-day operations of what an institution will do as soon as they buy a bond. Right. So that's the first model. The second model is what we call the Jetty model, which is that journal entry and transaction and interest. And you can see here that it's actually set up to be a very simple one-stop shop dashboard for all of the information for the month. So when they come in and they put in the journal end date, so for instance, here we're looking at 9/30 of 21, we want to concatenate all of the transactions that have happened throughout the entire month of September. So we need to see all the cash transactions, we need to see all of the actual buys and sells and call transactions, and then also any interest accrual assumptions that need to be estimated and then ultimately put into the system as to when it was received. So the user has the option to do this on a monthly basis. They could do it at month end, or they can set this journal date and just come in and update the daily activity. And each time they update that activity, ultimately it will create it for each day that is successive day that exists in the month. So if they're sitting at the 15th of September, we'll see all the transactions that have happened from September 1st through September 15th. And so if that's if you're running it at the 15th. So ultimately you come in, you update that activity. This here has already actually been updated for 9/30, so I don't need to update this already because I can see all the activity dates here. That's been done, but there is no posting here, meaning that the daily reconciliation, the system that's going to monitor all of these cash transactions on a daily basis to create the reports, doesn't have it posted. And so, through the use of some conditional formatting and whatnot and some scripting, we make sure that before they can go into the month-end process and closing out the books, that they've posted all of these transactions and verified them. So you can come through here and they just have to verify, okay, these were the accounts that, on each of these days, these were the transaction types, and here were the total amounts of what happened. They come in, you can post the cash, and ultimately it gets posted there, and you can see now it's done. So I know that section is complete. Same thing for the transactions. Come in, I can do the system adjusted transactions. I can come in and see it's not been posted yet, but I'm going to come in, I confirm the settlement dates, I put them in here, I post the transactions. Transactions have been updated, all that posts. And then the third thing is interest. I've already inputted the actual cash flow dates and the interest that was received on those dates. I come in, I post that interest, and now, so it's actually what it was already posted. Sorry, this is I didn't delete it out of the interest out of the database because I did this to try and show you guys how this works, but I'd already done it. So this actually has already been posted. So ultimately, all of the information is in the system now. So all the daily reconciliations, all that info is there, and so we can come in and we can ultimately see from the dates that we want to run. So if I want to come in here and do let's do September 1st to September 30th. And I can come in here, update the reconciliation. And now you can see here's a concatenated view of everything that's happened in September in a chronological order. So now they can see all of the withdrawals, all of the deposits, all the interest receipts, all of the, the calls, the buys, all that stuff in a simple report that they can come in, print out, or do whatever they need to do with. So that's a very nice feature to be able to come in and ensure that they've hit all of the elements they need to hit, and that they're not forgetting anything. Because accounting is definitely not one of those areas where you want to shy away and estimate things or be a penny off here or a penny off there, no big deal. It is a big deal. So data integrity is everything. And so we really have created, I think, a system that not only I think does the calculations and all of the view aspect or the presentation aspect of it, I think is very attractive. But it also has put a lot of constraints in place to make sure the user isn't skipping steps, right? To ensure that, okay, we know they're not going to make errors in the security because we're modeling that, right? We know that we're not going to be able to skip out on the reconciliation because every transaction that was ever posted has to then be confirmed and sent to the system. Otherwise, it will not allow you to process the month-end data, right? So it forces the eyes of the customer to ensure that every transaction is exactly what it's supposed to be. And so from an accountability standpoint, that's obviously very important. So those are the journal side. And then for the journal entries and what it actually creates is the entire journal. So for any of you out there that are accounting buffs, I don't, if there are any of you out there, these are the journal entries that ultimately would go into some sort of ledger system for an accounting department, so that they can actually create these. All the account codes, the credits and debits are already matched up to whatever the internal accounting ledger system requires, and it will come through and it will basically create the full journal on a cash basis and on an accrual basis and a full report of all of these. So we'll be able to come in again with that menu-driven printing option. They'll be able to come in and get all these selections, and then they can send not only the digital copy, a data export from a CSV that they'll provide for the ledger, but then also a hard copy report so that the accountants can go by line and make sure that everything adds up to their internal books. So it's, again, I think a great system that gives total transparency and makes life very easy on accountants and treasury officials to figure out if there is an error, where is the error, and an easy way to rectify it. So that's the Jetty system. With the last 10 minutes or so here, I'll just show you the last two models that we've created. The first one is the PAD dashboard, or that portfolio analytics dashboard, which is ultimately going to be the system or the model that people will use on a daily basis, or these treasurers would use on a daily basis to make decisions. Right, so we're past just doing the transaction and the processing. Now we're looking at, okay, how do we actually make a decision to buy a bond? What is the next thing that we need to be doing to ensure that we are buying the correct bond, we're spending the money where it needs to be spent, and it aligns with our benchmark and everything we have set up. So the system has a full set of user settings that allows them to come in, create what their benchmark, what their strategy portfolio looks like, all the base information about who they are, where the market data is coming from, any asset liability framework that they want to apply, which is well beyond the scope of this talk, but it's a way for essentially institutions to cash match or asset match liabilities. So they can come in and buy bonds in a time frame where they know a liability exists. So if I know that there's a debt service payment of $100 million 3 years from now in June of 24, then I know that from an ALM perspective, buying a bond of around 100 million in June of 24 would be a good option because it can roll off prior to that liability coming due, and that money comes in the door and then goes right back out the door. All right, so it's a way that the majority of our clients run on an asset liability framework, and this system really does that very well, and being able to line up what the assets are to their relative to their current liability. So along with all the portfolio values and liquidity and their targets and all that fun stuff, we provide that asset liability chart that shows them exactly where their maturities are, and then an immunization amount of how much that they should have invested, so that they can actually come in here when they know they have money to spend, and they can start looking at timeframes as to what makes sense for them to invest. So February, for instance, February of 24, I have no blue bar there, which would mean that the portfolio contained assets there already. June of 24, it's a great example. There's nothing there. So if I was to be looking in that space, I want to be looking in that time frame of June in order to be making these types of decisions for what bonds I'm going to be buying next. So it really takes the guesswork out of investing for a lot of these institutions. Instead of listening to the noise, they follow the system, and the system tells them exactly where they need to be. So there's other elements in here, the variance tables and whatnot that allow them to come in and see exactly how much off the mark they are. They can come in and sort it, ascending if they want to see the biggest negative variances. They can come in here and ultimately do that, and then they can see how much of the percentage of immunization for each year they currently have. So they can come in and ultimately figure out maybe there's some other year that needs to be immunized versus what they currently have. And then we have a full index composition breakdown that breaks down the portfolio relative to the index set that has been created in the system. So each one of these institutions has some subset index strategy that we've created that basically looks like what the portfolio should be on average, right? So these indexes, really create the color in the lines, I guess you could say, of how the institution can come in and stay on target, right? So it's a methodology for them to be able to come in and compare. So when they're able to actually see where their variances are, I can see Treasury 1 to 3 year bonds are lacking by about 12% relative to the target. Agency bullets in the 1 year and in space about 13%. So those might be my first targets. All right, so if I know that I'm in, and this is actually a good example, Treasury 1 to 3 year, I know I have a big need. I've got 33 million that I need to put there, and it turns out in June of 24, which is in that kind of like 2.5 year space, just above that, there's anywhere between 4 to 13 million that could be placed there. So I know right away as a buyer that I can go out to the brokerage market and start looking and asking my brokers to show me Treasury bonds that have maturity dates in that time frame. So without getting into the nitty-gritty details, hopefully you can kind of see how this would be useful for an institution that very quickly needs to make decisions and doesn't necessarily want to fill that decision time frame with a bunch of noise from economists and news and brokers and all these other things that can cloud judgment when people are out here trying to make decisions about deploying money for investments. So that's the management dashboard. There's also, portfolio summary and a lot of other reports, cash holding reports, the securities reports, all that fun stuff. There's some additional reports. This model is not done. It's about 90% complete, but we have, several more canvases we need to put in there. And, the beauty of this is that we will also be able to build out additional canvases throughout time. So one of the biggest benefits of Quantrix in this platform is ultimately the flexibility of being able to create solutions for individual clients that may or may not apply to other people. And so we can come in, and if we have a client request a very specific report, a report format, it's not a huge deal for us to come in and create that because it's highly likely the data already exists. What doesn't exist necessarily is the actual format they want it in. And so we can come in, we can create that and deploy it. And if we have a quick turnaround, we look really good relative to some of the, well, if there was a competitor, there's really not a competitor, but we look really good in their eyes in being able to be very agile and quick to the draw to ensure that we're meeting the needs and the custom needs of our clients, right? And we also have the auxiliary benefit of anything we design for someone else can now be deployed to everyone. And we've had several examples of that over the years where I've built out some more complex models or more complex canvases and things like that ultimately became useful for many people. And so, it might be, a short-term effort to get it done, but ultimately it can really pay off in the long run for multiple users. And so being able to do that on this type of system is very, very beneficial. Not something you get in, custom from the ground built up proprietary systems that typically just aren't that agile. So Quantrix is a big reason why we love this platform. Besides everything else, is the agility factor and the ability to keep things very organized and understand if there's ever a problem, we can come back and we can fix that problem very quickly. Right, so we can come in and ultimately do what we need to do. We can fix it. We can deploy the solution. We can fix any problems. And typically the turnaround time for us will be very minimal because we've built this. And I think the gentleman before us in the last presentation talked about indexing and organizing models into folders. We've done that to the nth degree, and it's something that served us well because we can very quickly go back and pinpoint when some sort of error is popping up. We don't need to look through the entire model to understand where that error is being generated from. It exists in a silo within the model browser that we can go to and pinpoint the problem very quickly. So that's in a nutshell our pad model. The pair model, which is what the system was actually named after, is the evaluation and reporting model. And again, I'll just run you through. I know none of this it probably makes sense to most of you. You're not in this business, but ultimately what we were going for is the ability to really create reports that would be robust, would still look really good, on a relative basis, because even our competitor reporting platforms, a lot of them are black and white. There's no graphs. There's no color and hue to it. And so what we've done here, along with the technology, is also really focused a lot of time on the user experience and the GUI interface, right? We want the user to be excited to actually be in here and not just be a bunch of ugly matrices. Right, when you're data geeks in the background doing this stuff, it's cool, fine. We can do that amongst modelers, to trade information and to get the answer. But in this framework, in the way that we're utilizing Quantrix, our customers don't care how we're necessarily getting to the answer. What they need to do is have a presentation that is consumable by them, by their constituents, by their bosses, by city councils and county supervisors. And so all of that is very important for us to be able to produce reports that also make them look good. And it doesn't look like that, they just created some janky Excel model that, with some, a few cell lines here and some colors and called it good. So we spent a lot of time on the breakdown of the look and feel, the colors, all of that, and it's still changing. So there's still some additional color changes and stuff. Again, we're probably about 90% of the way through, but we definitely still have some some time frame that between now and the end of the year to this out. But you can kind of see here that the system's going to come in and produce each of these reports, their redemptions reports, their purchases reports, all this fun stuff that they ultimately can then print out again through that menu-driven printing system. And it will, give them everything that they need. So we're at the 11:50 mark. So hopefully and informative to see a little bit different aspect and view of how we're using this purely 100% as a client interface. Again, we're deploying all the models. Everything that's happening in the backgrounds of Quantrix is happening in my group. And, we develop everything and then deploy analytics with attractive canvases and reports that hopefully at the end of the day really creates a robust environment for them to do their trading, their operations, and creates a lot of value add to our firm. And we're doing it all with the relative, you say it's not cheap, but from a relative framework of trying to build something on our own to accomplish what we've done with this system would be an exorbitant cost relative to what the cost is for us to maintain, a Quantrix cloud enterprise platform and be able to deliver that value add. So, net cost efficiency, the framework, the calculation engine, all of these things in Quantrix have really aligned for us to make this the system of the future. And we plan on building out everything we do going forward will be in this platform. So, with that, I can, hand it back. Brad, I don't know if you're there or no, there we go. Brendan.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Jason. That was awesome. And I think it's really great to be able to see Quantrix from a little bit different perspective.
Actually, it's the Q&A session, and I can fire off some of the questions that we've seen in the list here. We've got a few for you. Let me scroll back up to the top here. All right. How are you capturing the trade history? Is this by using data push and data import? First
yeah, exactly. So everything here is on a data push to the SQL server, right? So we have each of the matrices where the underlying data that they're entering ultimately is placed. Also has it has a corresponding data push associated with it to that SQL database that's selected to that specific institution. All right. So we have individual databases for each client. And under that database, there is, 10 or 12 different tables that, warehouse the trade activity, the cash activity, the reconciliation, the journal, the cash journal, the accrual journal, all that information resides in those tables. And so each model, we have to come in, and if we're going to deploy a model to XYZ city, we come in and we define through the data browser, each one of those that has a data push or data import associated with it, and we link it to the correct database on the SQL platform. So everything is spot on. Everything we do is through data push and data import. We still have some legacy data links that are in there from the old days, from some CSV files and stuff that we have. But eventually, once I get through all this other stuff, we're going to be doing away with those, and we'll be 100% utilizing that what was called data nav back in the day, but the data import process for all of this back and forth in the system.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to the next question here. How do you deal with different people using the models on the cloud at the same time? Do you create a role for each user, or do you have a separate model instance?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's actually no. I mean, that's the beauty of the cloud is in the administration, because Quantrix, you guys, fortunately, when this rolled out and as you've kind of developed it over time, you've actually given us a pretty robust administration platform for us to come in and permission users for very specific models. So the beauty of this is, let's say we get a client that, and this is actually very common, where we'll have a client that the Treasury Department is responsible for trade processing, trade transactions, and all of putting in the information, but they don't touch the journals. The journal entries and everything goes to the accounting or finance department, and oftentimes, they may not even be in the same building, right? So there are, potential situations where we need to have multiple accounts associated, and we may have the, a portion of the Jetty model or the CAP model deployed to the accounting department, and they can see those, but they can't see the pad model or the pair model that's more in the realm of the treasurer who's doing the actual reporting and management of the actual portfolio. So we do administrate on an account by account basis, and we specifically assign each account very specific models. So when they log in, they are only seeing their library of models. And then in the future here, we are going to be actually moving away even from that menu-driven platform that Quantrix has, and we're still kind of working out the details of how this will work. But ultimately, we will move into a portal that will be through our actual MaxQ Analytics website when they log in, and whether we're using some sort of SSO, single security login, or we utilize the front end of our website as the security element, and then a pass through to the name of the model. So we're administrating through the portal, and now all of a sudden they don't even see that menu. It just literally comes in. And they see our portal, they click on a link, and it jumps into whatever model it is that they specifically have assigned to them. So that's kind of how we do it. And yeah, it can become a little cumbersome if you get hundreds of clients on there and each one of them has to have their own. There's no question, the administration from that standpoint becomes a little bit more difficult, but those are good problems to have. If we have those problems, that means we're probably making great money and this thing's been worth it, and we'll hire more people to figure it out.
Great. Another question here. How many developers have been working on your solution, and for how long?
Yeah, so great question. And I wish I had a lot, but it's been me. So I've been a Quantrix guy. You can see the sweatshirt. I think you guys gave this to me sometime after my 100th phone call into customer service. But I started working, probably 6-7 years ago. I think about 7 years ago, I started working in Quantrix. And you guys know me pretty well, but for those of you out there, I was really stuck in Excel for the first decade plus of my career, and we're creatures of habit, and ultimately it can be very difficult sometimes to consume something new and feel like, okay, I'm going to change everything. I'm going to change, and it really took me leaving my old firm, coming to this place, to Mischler, and sitting down and recognizing what I wanted the future to look like. What is it that I can do, to build out this platform and this portal, and what kind of system would be beneficial to that. And that's where Quantrix came into play. And so I gave it its chance, right? I came in, I started to learn it from the ground up, it takes time. Right? And there's lots of mistakes that are made along the way. But at some point, I think like anything, right? You get to a point where you're comfortable in designing in the framework and the element that you have to work in. And so I've spent a lot of sweat equity, a lot of time over the years building these models. So it's been many thousands of hours of time building these. You guys didn't even see the other models that existed prior to Pair. That what you saw today is only 1 year of work. And there's many other models that we've created over the years that have taken just as long. So the answer, I guess, to the question is, yeah, it's me, and then I've got one other guy here is on my team who's our Python programmer, who's helping us with the portal. He's coming on board. But part of the problem of developing in this environment, what I'm in today, is you have to have a unique knowledge of the business itself. Right, it's one thing to have the knowledge of modeling and financial analytics and whatnot, but you really have to understand the nuances of institutional investing in the public fund space, right? About benchmarking and cash flow modeling and all that stuff. And so it's not really for me the difficulty of teaching someone Quantrix. The problem really is how do you get them to relate business intelligence about what we do into something useful in Quantrix. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to replicate myself to do that. So it has been a fairly lonely or sole pursuit for many years. But we are building it to eventually get it to where we would have a couple of people involved in developing additional analytics down the road.
So I have maybe one more question here, which I think you've answered parts of a fairly long question, but maybe this part of it would be interesting to the audience. Quantrix, we saw some examples of how it's used by modelers, how it's used, internally between the finance department and some other organizations. But it looks like you've selected Quantrix essentially as the front end for your application. And can you say something about why you made that choice and what are the benefits of that architecture?
Yeah, sure. So, I think it's a very valid point, right? Because, you could look at the front end of Quantrix and say that in the realm of strengths and weaknesses, it's not the biggest strength, right? We understand that. That's not really what Quantrix was designed for. But the reason why I wanted to make it work is because, it has evolved to a point where you can see from a front end, it does the job, right? We don't have to get to the point where we're doing, 3D graphing and, crazy visuals. Really, at the end of the day, what we needed is something that was pleasant, it was readable, it's consumable, and it's efficient. And before I ever even got into the front end design, right, my real job was to figure out, how do I create, these analytics, the complexity of the analytics, store large amounts of data that need to be referenced to ultimately get me the output I needed. And I knew that Excel wasn't really the answer, right? That you can't take a 1 gigabyte spreadsheet and do anything with it, right? But a 1 gigabyte database, right, I can do something with that, right? And I can, we can very easily reference that and, create the analytics we need to create Quantrix. So for me, it was more a decision of what I had built, the actual intelligence on, right? The calculation engine behind Quantrix, the dimensionality of Quantrix, the data import and pushing of Quantrix, all of those things led me to really just say, you know what, there are other things out there, Tableau, there are other elements from a front end perspective that can make sense. But because the administration is all warehoused in one element, the cloud enterprise is relatively, it's efficient, and it's relatively inexpensive on an account by account basis for us. Ultimately we can pair it with the existing calculation engine and the intelligence and the processing of the data. I wanted to ensure that ultimately we could try and use as much of Quantrix as possible before I looked at any other alternative. And the reality is I was just able to create what I needed to create utilizing the presentation canvas. And so, I'm not really in the market of breaking something that's not broke, right? It's really just comes down to, it's efficient. It's not, there's no question I could do other things, but I can't do those other things without creating additional complexity in the process. And I don't need them. Right? I don't, for what we're doing, the canvas aspect or the presentation aspect of Quantrix it's already great. And, there's always progression that can be made, but it does what we needed to do. And I think ultimately, you stick with what you know. And if you've already got a system that you're paying for one thing, why bring in additional costs and elements to it if you can accomplish what you need in that system? And that's ultimately.
Jason, terrific. Thank you for your presentation. Really enjoyed that different perspective.